Let's jump into our CougarBoard question of the week, because it's going to lead us into our football discussion.
Yes.
And that's going to lead us to Chase Roberts. If you're not familiar with CougarBoard, it's the largest online community of BYU fans with thousands of posts every day. This question comes from Billy Jack Blue, one of their insider subscribers. How are spending budgets and NIL compensation determined for athletic teams outside of football and basketball? My question is driven from the two narratives of we don't spend enough on baseball, so we aren't competitive, versus the narrative of if we were more competitive, we would receive more money and support. Like, what comes first, the chicken
or the egg? Yes, that's the exact same.
Okay, let's tackle the first one. How are spending, and I think they're still figuring this out because they're still waiting for the NCAA to rule on roster limitations, which will have a big factor into who gets what, because teams will know how many players they can have. That's currently on pause, which I think kind of threw people for a loop because it was moving through and they expected a ruling a couple weeks ago.
Everybody
and then
thought it was going to be
stopped.
105, period. No walk-ons, basically. Yeah. Everybody on scholarship, and then everybody part of the revenue share and all of that. And then all of a sudden they're waiting for a judge who may, issue an injunction and change it and have the ability to have more. And so there's a lot up in the air when it comes to how universities are going to handle this internally. And remember, when it first started out, the whole NIL part was to be independent, right? Like, it's going to be run outside by groups that were not tied directly to the university. And now all of a sudden, there's this move for it to come in-house and for the universities to control this revenue share. And so this is a work in progress as we speak. And who determines how much baseball gets and how much women's basketball gets and all of that, up to this point has kind of been whatever those programs can kind of raise on their own, right? But that's changing moving forward with this revenue sharing initiative, that each sport's going to get a certain amount. I still think the sports that can generate more interest and have more donors can get more.
Right. And the revenue generators are always going to be the cash cows.
Right. And the ones that are having success, right?
Yeah.
When you're winning and you're bringing, it's like success breeds success. Money makes more money. Right? It's just kind of how it works. So when you got a basketball team and a football team, both preseason ranked already, big time recruits coming in, winning portal battles, all of that, it gets the fan base excited and donors start to go, hey, we give some more, we can give some more. Yeah,
and you can't just throw money at something and make them better.
Right.
Mark Pope tried that initially. It is, you got to have a core, and then when you go and invest in certain kids, they got to be home runs.
Right.
Or you're in fifth place in the WCC for a second straight year.
And you can't invest a bunch of money in a very talented young man or woman that doesn't fit in the culture.
Right.
Because then that takes away from what you're trying to do. And it hurts team chemistry. And then you feel like, wow, did we way overpay for that player or what? The other thing we're all waiting for, and I talked to lots of coaches over the last several months, and everyone says, yeah, we're kind of waiting for the NCAA to come in and do something in terms of putting some fences around what can be done with caps and limits. When you think about it right now, the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer for that matter, NHL, all have more rules and governance around salary caps, free agency, than college sports do right now.
Yeah.
Professional sports are way more regulated to make sure that there's some balance in what they're doing. If they didn't, the Yankees would win the World Series every single year.
One would think.
They should, right? If there's no salary caps and no roster limits and no, and it was this, everybody could be a free agent whenever they wanted to. Yeah. Everybody would just go to the Yankees and they would win every year.
Or the Cubs, or the Dodgers.
Who
I'd like to think they'd go to the Cubs.
Who would win in football every year? I don't know. Maybe the Giants would be better.
They do a nice job with their salary cap,
and
they've found a way to create parity.
Right.
But one thing that is never going to happen is fairness. This isn't a fair thing. In the capitalistic marketplace we're in. All the sports aren't going to get the same amount of money. All the sports don't generate the same kind of attention.
Right.
They don't sell the same number of tickets. Football is such a financial driver, and we've had every coach come on this show, and they admit it. They understand. Football drives the bus. Basketball is a close second, and everyone else is further back. And coaches that come to terms with that sleep better at night, because that's the reality of things. And it's the same way at all the other schools. And one school might invest more in baseball, but they might invest less in softball or soccer or whatever. And it's dependent on interest and what can generate revenue,
right,
which is the same thing how the business world works. And college sports, we've known, has been a business for a long time. Now it's just obvious. Paying the players, paying the coaches, raising ticket prices. There's nothing cheap across the board. And now it's about how do we use our money wisely and how do we maximize it? And that doesn't necessarily mean we pour all our money into a sport that might on a great day get 2,500 fans, when across the street on a bad day they get 59,000.
Right. It's exactly right. It's economics.
That's just the way it is.
But I will say this, in today's world of NIL, and everybody's better off financially. Even the sports. So you can say, man, they don't get their fair share, and they value, let's just say.
Or they don't get as much
let's just
as
say
something
this baseball
else.
thing. Wichita State unbelievably supports their baseball. Well, they got this great history of baseball, right?
Or maybe they have one guy that says, I'm giving you $2 million.
I'm a billionaire, and I played baseball here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to support this baseball program. But by and large, it's driven by fan interest and how many people are in the stands and how many eyeballs are on television.
It doesn't guarantee wins. Oklahoma State football with Boone Pickens and his estate is not shy one penny of battling with the big boys, and they took last place last year in the Big 12 with 21 returning starters. So it doesn't just mean you
have to evaluate talent. It makes it so much more important that you evaluate talent appropriately, and then not only that you coach up that talent, right? And then in addition to coaching up that talent, you put the players out on the field that can play as a unit and win football games. Or win basketball games for that matter. One of the great things that I thought that Kevin Young did last year, because they had a talented team, but does anybody think that BYU had more talent out on the floor than many of the teams that they beat this last year in the Big 12?
No.
But that team played as a unit last year.
Yeah.
And I would submit that if Kevin Young can work that same kind of magic this year, where they play as a unit and they have great chemistry, and they defend as a team, and they do all those things that team did last year, I think the talent's upgraded in a big way.
Upgraded the talent in the portal.
So now, if he can continue to do what he did with upgraded talent, then all of a sudden you got a team that's in the top 10.
Yeah.
And I think people are assuming out there, because when we look at the preseason polls already, they're going, oh, wow, Kevin Young proved that he was a good coach. He created chemistry. He's got enough of those chemistry guys back to teach the new guys. He's adding all this talent. This should be a top 8, top 6 program, top 10 program, maybe a Final Four program.
If it comes together.
So we'll see. But coaching them up and getting them to play as a team is still as important as it has ever been. And I think that Kevin proved that last year.
All right, Billy Jack Blue, thanks for the question, our CougarBoard question of the
Stevens,
week.
Ken Stevens says, hey, it was fun to see you on the cruise, Blaine, and I love telling you my Danny Plater story, which I did love. He told me a great story about our old friend Danny Plater, who's a great wide receiver at BYU, who's passed away, and Kent shared a great story with me about Danny.
That's
It was
awesome.
fun.